Hello, everyone, and welcome to another webisode of All Politics Are Local. I'm WSAV NOW Reporter Jon Dowding. Every week, we take the time to break down some of those big headlines coming out of Washington and Atlanta to see how it's impacting us right here in the Coastal Empire and Low Country. As always, we are joined by WSAV Washington correspondent Kellie Meyer in Washington, D.C. Hey, Kellie, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Of course, thanks for being here. We missed you last week. You had a nice day off yesterday for Labor Day, and we're jumping right back into it. August recess is over. There's a lot going on. We're heading into the final stretch of the election season during a psychotic and crazy, unpredictable election year. Let's start off with, obviously, a lot of the unpredictability comes from and stems from the pandemic. What's that, you may ask? So basically, one of the big things that we've been talking a lot about in recent weeks has been obviously back to school. When the pandemic first started, schools went virtually. That was the only thing we could really do. And now we're seeing a hybrid of the two, where some schools are going back, other schools are just doing virtual. Here in Savannah, they have a bunch of options, which is great for families. But, a lot of those hybrid options. Kellie, I know you spoke to some lawmakers last week from the Southeast where, we saw that resurgence of cases a couple months ago. And hopefully after the Labor Day weekend, we don't see a resurgence of cases, but, we never know. What were they telling you about how the reopening process has been going? What have they been saying that they've been seeing and hearing from their constituents and different elected officials at the local and state level about how schools are reopening?
Yeah, it was a really interesting piece actually because we had lawmakers from across the Southeast in the piece, along with a woman who is at the Florida Nurses Association. And I reached out to them because the Massachusetts Nurses Association put out a statement saying why they're concerned about students going back. So I reached out to Florida and checked in with them, and they said they're working on their statement, but she has heard concerns from nurses who are saying that both a nursing shortage in general, but also a shortage of school nurses makes her hesitant to send the kids back, as well as just saying we just don't know everything we need to know about this virus. It's so unpredictable, it's so uncertain. Why use our kids as an experiment, really, is what she said. But then I talked with our Florida senators, Marco Rubio and Rick Scott. They're saying, parents should have the choice of either to send their kids back in person or to do virtual distance learning. And Senator Rubio was saying that he's concerned about the risks that come with not sending your kids back to school, the challenges they would face socially or just with learning, if there even are learning, if they're at home. And then Rick Allen, a congressman from Georgia, said his district is doing it right. He went to visit a school. He said that the kids and the teachers are so happy to be back, and they don't have any cases. So he was trying to provide an example of how the rest of the country can do this the right way.
Positive cases, 0.08%. Students are so happy to be back in school.
I imagine that online learning is better than nothing, but it most certainly is not equivalent to in-person, in-classroom instruction.
I mean, it's been really interesting to see how different districts are doing the return to school. Here in our area in Savannah, Chatham County Public Schools, they're all virtual learning. They actually introduced, I did a story, all the weeks are flowing into one another, as are all the weeks of this year. But I think I did a story last week or the week before, I can't remember, about this new virtual learning. They're calling it like a Twilight program, where basically kids from K through 5 can do school at night in like the evenings between like 4:30 to 7:30 when their parents who may be working are at home. So it's interesting to see these districts implementing some new like initiatives and new programs to be able to accommodate families for those districts and areas that don't feel comfortable sending kids back. One of my colleagues did a story a few weeks ago about Bullitt County Schools, which is an hour DNA in our viewing area for those who aren't familiar. And they reopened schools, but now they're seeing a resurgence in cases. And this is not a really huge metropolitan area. It's more rural. It's outside of Savannah, and they're seeing a resurgence of cases as they reopen schools. So I think it's just really interesting to be able to kind of see and get a gauge for the country's doing with this reopening process. And Kellie, what are they looking forward to in the future? We're seeing some universities who opened initially return back and kind of take some steps back and say, we're closing again. Our alma mater, Temple University, did that. They reopened, and now they're saying, we're doing everything virtually because they saw a resurgence of cases. So Kellie, what else are, the elected officials saying about as things are reopening?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I mean, they're keeping an eye on, how it's going to be this coming fall. They are saying that they are flexible on changing their plans, both when I did stories on the Department of Defense and their military schools, and also when we're hearing from lawmakers who are following this on the COVID oversight. South Carolina Congressman Jim Clyburn is keeping an eye on it on his board as they oversee that, along with Louisiana Congressman Steve Scalise as well. They're saying, basically, let's just see how this goes. Should we pull back, like you mentioned? I think they are staying flexible on that. But I think another thing is that they're looking at is the funding aspect, which is how they can, or members of Congress, the federal government can really have a hand in this, is to provide the funding for PPE, testing, that sort of thing, and cleaning, anything like that. And that leads us into the topic we're going into next is the COVID relief bill, because that ties into the overall package that lawmakers are still working on as they return really today.
This has been a topic we've been talking about for months. We saw the HEROES Act pass the House. Obviously, it was a democratically led bill, and obviously it's stalled in the Senate, as well as, in the Trump administration as well. And we're not really seeing a lot of headway, where we haven't been really hearing a lot, because, the beginning of August was when both parties were getting into convention mode. And, we saw the unconventional conventions that were virtually and some hybrid. And so the focus was on that. And we're seeing a slight return now, Kellie, to this next relief bill, or what's really going on? And are you hearing anything big, or is it still kind of too early to tell?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, August really, we turned away from the discussions on that. I was trying to press the lawmakers on, hey, there's still a bill that's stalled. There's still people out there who are running out of unemployment benefits, insurance, things like that. People are struggling, but we're here at these conventions celebrating different parties. And it was just a really interesting couple of weeks. But now, like you said, they are here. They're coming back, seemingly to get to work on this, but also to avoid a government shutdown, which also happens at the end of the month. So that's another spending bill. So whether these get lumped together, I mean, we're already getting so close to the end of September. So are they going to put those together? It is a plan for them to still address this, to comment on how it's going to go or make a bet on how it's going to go. This has been back and forth all summer. Negotiations have been stalled. The deal may be happening. The deal isn't happening. So we're going to keep an eye on it. We are talking with our lawmakers every day. So I will definitely keep you informed of what happens. But I know that is front of mind as they return. I know they aren't going to be able to avoid our questions as we approach them in the Capitol about this. But I just don't know when or how they're going to come to the table on this.
Yeah, and I mean, another thing that I wanted to touch on as part of this relief bill was funding for HBCUs. Historically Black colleges and universities. We have been hearing. We saw it earlier in the year, the President signed the Future Act, which basically guaranteed federal funding to HBCUs for the future, for that we could see. And but these universities, these institutions, like many other institutions, are really going through it right now because of the pandemic. And so last week I spoke to Senator David Perdue's campaign, as well as his Democratic challenger in November, Jon Ossoff, about their plans to try to help HBCUs. And it was interesting because they both said that obviously Senator Perdue is currently elected, and he was saying that their campaign wants to kind of push for another round of funding in that next COVID relief bill for HBCUs, while obviously Jon Ossoff's campaign was basically just saying what he would do if he was elected. But he had a really detailed, laid out plan that he rolled out last week, while David Perdue's campaign was kind of just saying, basically they're just saying his history speaks for itself. He supported HBCUs in the past. He's going to continue to do it. How? They didn't say, but they're going to just say it. Let's take a listen to that and hear what they have to say.
Senator Perdue has delivered for HBCUs. He's delivered for HBCU students in a variety of ways. And these institutions can count on funding because Senator Perdue helped lead the effort to make that.
Strengthen these institutions, which are essential conduits to economic opportunity and prosperity for Black Georgians. And, if Senator Perdue had been doing his job, then these institutions wouldn't be in such difficulty as they are right now.
When we can hear and learn more about that next rollout for this COVID relief bill, we'll see funding allocated for obviously PPE, medical supplies, stuff like that, but also for HBCUs, also for, public institutions, public schools, other real supplies that you mentioned. And I mean, I think the big thing right now, though, is the fact that a lot of people are going to, obviously, you said there's a spending bill. We have this next round of COVID relief, but we're also in an election year. And I think we're going to see that shift towards the election and this from legislation to the election, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's always a problem when we come up into an election year, just how much of the focus moves from Capitol Hill to the campaign trail. I don't know if it'll be different this year because of COVID. That might bring a lot of the attention back to the Hill because there isn't really much of a campaign trail because of COVID, and there is a lot to deal with on the Hill in terms of legislation and relief. So I think that might be a difference in what we're seeing this year, and something to look out for as we kind of go through this next month. October might be a little bit less action up here as they return back to their districts to campaign. And of course, November, the big day.
Coming around really quick. So, I mean, one thing before we go, Kellie, you already mentioned one big thing now that's coming up, just taking a look ahead, the spending bill. That's going to be a huge thing that pops up. What other stuff are you keeping your eyes out for, putting your ears out, trying to get feelers for? What else are you trying to be aware of that's coming up?
I think the two big words you're going to hear this month is going to be stimulus, or maybe stimulus checks, another round of relief, and also the government avoiding a government shutdown at the end of the month. Those are the two big things I think you're going to hear in the month of September, and hopefully will be dealt with before the end of September.
And I think too, they probably hopefully will be dealt with. Trump administration's been running on the economy. And so if they can't pass a stimulus bill and the government shuts down again, may not be the best situation for the president going into November. But like you said, we'll just have to wait and see. As with everything, this whole year has been completely unpredictable. But thank you as always, Kellie, for joining us and helping us kind of get a little clarity in this unpredictability that we're living in right now.
I'm happy to help. Thank you for having me.
Of course. You can catch all of Kellie's stories on our website right now. Just go to wsav.com/Washington, and you can catch up on previous episodes of All Politics Are Local also on our website. Just go to wsav.com/allpoliticsarelocal. Thank you again so much for watching. I'm Jon Dowding. We'll see you again next week on All Politics Are Local.